Program Director, Tabiseng Makata, who is also a deputy at Statistics. She's one of the deputies at Statistics South Africa. Let me appreciate the time that you have given me. I have a lot of gadgets here, so if I remove some, when we're done, someone must come and sort out the table, because otherwise I'll cause a lot of confusion. Let me say, for starters, that I listened to everyone clapping hands for me, and I really appreciate that. Why do I appreciate that? Is that I've never been a very good public speaker, so I usually appreciate it when people clap hands for me up front, because in the event I disappoint them, they don't have to worry about not clapping hands for me later. That means a lot to me, and I can assure you I'm going to carry it throughout my life and say I once had people clapping hands for me. But the program director, lest I forget, and I shouldn't, let me take note of my brother Rory Vola, who is responsible for the companies and intellectual property registration in South Africa, together with our deputy. And of course, it's always good that when you move around, Rory, you always have a deputy. And when you do your work, you have a deputy. In as much as I sit with my deputy in Tabiseng Makata there, and they are reminding me that the deputy, Ms. Tloko, didn't just make time to come and join us. She wants to make sure that when we talk about the businesses, we make sure that we don't forget the intellectual part, which I may come to a little later. Jerry from the United Nations, you know, you can't do work without taking note of the United Nations, particularly the United Nations Statistics Division. So Jerry has a name, and I have to note it. It's Ziyang Chen. So he says to me, don't struggle, just put the name Jerry, it will be enough. Now he sits right in the middle there, and I will learn later why Nwabisa chose to put the UN right at the back there, but that I will leave for now. Let me take note, of course, of members of the WIESBADEN Group, and particularly the steering committee of the WIESBADEN Group. Other members of the UNSD, Eurostat. We have people from our South African Revenue Services here, and indeed we have the chairpersons of various sessions of the WIESBADEN Group meetings, and indeed we have staff members from Stats SA, and all those who have come to join us here for the 29th meeting. I'm told that I should try to welcome you in all languages. So what I will do is that during tea time, I'm going to walk around and talk to some of the people whose languages I haven't mastered, so that I can find time to learn different languages and be able to surprise you later. Because statistics is about giving stability. Where do we find stability? So we are gathering here. This town where we are meeting was a farm. It was a game reserve some years ago in the 1940s. So it had two roads that were coming to meet. And those two roads used to cause a four-way stop. And for whatever reason, it became to be called four ways. and everyone wanted to find themselves driving through this neighborhood between the 1940s and the 1970s for different reasons. For those who wanted to go to the city, Johannesburg, you would always find, out of the four-way stop, you would always find a route to Johannesburg. If you wanted to find yourself to the game reserve or a park, a national park, one of the parks, you could find yourselves readily here. Actually, the Lions Park just got moved to Magaliesberg or next to the dam, Hartebees, not so long ago. But if you wanted to find yourself to Soweto, you could end up in Soweto. If you wanted to join a route to go to other cities and towns outside South Africa, outside Johannesburg, you could connect readily from here. That is why it was called Four Ways. And it's the same with the business register. The business register, which derives its work from the standards that we define as statisticians and make sure that it is registered in such a way, or it is documented in such a way that one, it recognizes different areas in business or of an economy of a nation. But also the second issue is to make sure that those who come with breaking new grounds, especially the intellectual grounds, get registered and make sure that it's not lost in the milieu of things do become very necessary. So the fact that we are gathering in Four Ways and we are here to talk about the business register, it is no coincidence. I guess it was by design. For those who lived then in the 1940s, they made sure that one day future generations would gather here and talk about this issue of history in the making. So now, the biggest challenge for us is not this meeting. It is about those who will talk of this gathering 40 years from now. In the papers that we're going to present, Program Director, one of the things that we need to deal with is how are we going to align our thinking now in the present, our thinking in the short term, in the medium term, and indeed project about 40 years down the line, so that others, when they meet somewhere else, I guess it won't be called Four Ways. When they meet then, they must quote this gathering. If they never quote us, or they never quote anything that comes out of here, then we haven't made a mark. Because then we'll be like any other business that existed, any other conference that existed, gathered and left without a mark. And indeed, one of the things that we need to make sure we do is to foster and facilitate collaboration. I know the group, the WIESBADEN group, has been seized by exchange of views and experiences on developing, maintaining, and indeed using registers. We need to support economic statistics. I was in the village for 2 weeks where I grew up. I had other family responsibilities. And one of my aunts brought an old document of her registration into the South African population system. And it's very critical that I say this, because in the olden days in South Africa, before we got 1994, where our democracy was ushered in, there are people who were classified as non-citizens and they were living here. They had no other place they had known throughout their lives, including the Nelson Mandela we have seen. He was declared persona non grata in his own country, in the country of his birth. So now, when my aunt brought me an old ID book, identification book, that she got in 1966, which was amongst the first books that were issued to women, because men were allowed, particularly black men, as in Indian, colored, Asian, as well as African, were allowed to get books when they come, identification books when they come to work in the cities. When they were in the rural areas, they were never allowed. But women were never allowed at all. They were always treated as minors. So one of the things that I observed was that it was written population register. In that book she got 1966. It was written population register and was that statistics division. Little did they know that one day, and when my aunt was standing there in 1966, little did she know that one day, amongst other people, a child of her own would be leading the statistics of our country and would take particular interest in that. So the question is, as we trudge and make note of what we want future generations to know, and we support economic statistics, what is it that we will leave that makes a path from Ottawa to Wiesbaden to here, so that it's not just the 29th session that we're talking about. It leaves a mark for economic statistics. Why is the 29th session program director very important? We are often told, and sometimes it is debated by scholars, that the base 10 mathematics was developed in Africa. I'm not making an assertion. I'm just making what I read somewhere. So if we read something somewhere else that says it was not developed here, let us have a debate and let's continue creating such debate for future generations to learn. But particularly, 70,000 years ago, east of Cape Town, 380 kilometers east of Cape Town, in the Blombos caves, there is markings that show geometric structures that were drawn in those caves. 35,000 years ago, according to carbon dating, on the Libombo Mountains, there is a bone of a baboon, a fibula bone, that was found with 29 marks on it, showing that 35,000 years ago, people who lived there could count. What made them mark 29? Is it a coincidence? Is it the fact that one day we would gather again here to mark the 29th session? And as we do so, is it a coincidence or reality that we are making note of what we will do to empower economic statistics? Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, let me again say that history is no pastime. History is no pastime. Those who make history are not even aware that they are making history at any given moment. But those who live down the road will know that they were making history. It's only a matter of time that we need to look at the other issue we are addressing here. It says that amongst other things that we need to look at is to address modern challenges. Those who were making markings on the bone of a fibula bone of a baboon, they didn't have technology, they had nothing. Actually, when we were gathered here, King Mzilikazi, when he was running away from King Shaka, settled in this neighborhood. He had no cell phone, he had no iPad, he had no computer. All he had was a group of warriors who could go north, south, east, west. And he left a mark. So now, since history is no pastime, what is it that, using and addressing the current challenge, modern challenge, what is it that we will make and leave a mark? So that those who lived 35,000 years ago and those who will live 35,000 years from now can come to fuse and be joined along the dotted line through our efforts. We need to provide tools and guidelines to make sure that the maturity model moves forward by providing new statistical techniques and classification. It's quite challenging. Most of us, when we're seated in a statistics classroom, being lectured and taught by those great professors, little did we know that we would be asked to gather at the world stage and make a difference. The calling always occurs beyond the classroom. And indeed, when we start refining those statistical tools, we will find meaning. We need to make sure that we enhance efficiency and harmonization. I can't say much about enhancing efficiency and harmonization. About a month from now, Program Director, we will be meeting in Ethiopia as the Directors General or heads of national statistical agencies for Africa. And amongst other things that we have always spoken about is harmonization of statistics through the strategy of the harmonization of statistics, which takes its call from the African Charter on Statistics. And the African Charter on Statistics looks at the Agenda 2063, which was designed in 2013 for building a 50-year trudge towards changing Africa. But Africa is not standing alone. We have met at the United Nations in the post-2015 development agenda to deal with the Sustainable Development Goals. This WIESBADEN Group meeting in 4 ways. What is it that we are taking to the United Nations Statistics Division next year in February, end of February, March? So that when we report on the Sustainable Development Goals in the year 2030, as if the year 2030 would never arrive, it's around the corner. When we report, we need to give the world a better hope. So let me mention that as we gather here, we will be able to exchange views, experiences, and of course, I've been told, myself and Rory, the Commissioner for Registrations of our company, we have been told that we must try and spend as much time here and listen to the papers. So when we disappear and sometimes come back and sit at the back and listen, and when we are not here, our colleagues, our deputies have guaranteed that they will always be with us when we have stepped off. We will be watching what is it that we are taking to our principals here in South Africa. But the discussion of statistics, the discussions of knowledge, the discussions of intellect, the discussions of statistical standards and classifications, and indeed, the whole issue about business registration and business registers in particular goes beyond boundaries. There are lots of debates now all over the world about trade negotiations. Imagine we were not there. Imagine we never gathered like this. It would be tough. So let us make the next few days something worth celebrating when other people who are not here, who are not statisticians, who are policymakers, who don't even worry much about statistics or registers, they must start finding value in the work that we do. Program Director, there's a statement coming from the village, and it's a legend, that I never stop talking. There's also another legend that I started talking a lot earlier in my life. And as that legend continues, one of the things they've told me is that if you don't stop me, I'll never stop. So you have to find a way of stopping me, because in the name of this gathering, I would love not to stop. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, I want to declare this meeting open and apologize that I never had enough time to prepare you enough input. I thank you.
As you see me adjusting the mic up and down, pretend you don't see that. We had wished that we would have a stage, and those at the back, I am hoping that if you can't see me, at least you can hear my voice. Colleagues, according to our program, we should now be stepping out